Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Freddie, and this time around we are going to talk about a wonderful book, and that is a short story collection by Annie Proulx, and the title is Close Range Wyoming Stories. So this is yet another really wonderful book by Annie Proulx, and I'm really happy that I discovered this one. So we actually read this book together with Kim from Becker's Books as a buddy read. And before that, we actually read Susanna Clark's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. But that book was a little bit too long, a little bit too, I don't know, unexciting for us. So we decided to ditch that and we read this one instead. And that was a good decision, I think, because this book ended up becoming one of the books that I really, really loved um, these few months. And I can also say that Annie Proulx is kind of like one of the authors that I like to read. The first book that I read from her was The Shipping News, and that was incredible, and I really loved it. And this one is also really wonderful, and I am for sure going to read more of her stuff. We'll definitely gonna keep an eye on the some of her other books. In fact, I already ordered one more short story collection by her, and it's called Heart Songs. I think that's her first short story collection. Now, if you're familiar with the Shipping News, you would know how that story turned out. Um, and the stories in Close Range, it is slightly different though, because the stories here, the tones are a little bit darker, I would say. And there are a few reasons why I really like the short story collection, why I really like Close Range. Not only the writing is really good, really wonderful, it's really descriptive and really poetic as well. And when I read the stories, it really felt like things just came alive, and it came alive in such a way that felt really distinct. Like the voice felt really distinct. You know that suddenly you know that even though you have not read like much of Proust's writing before, you kind of felt that there is this really distinct voice emanating from the writing. So that's really wonderful. Another part that I really liked about the short story collection is that um, the stories are about a culture that I am quite unfamiliar with personally, and that is the culture and the life of cowboys, ranchers, people who live in ranches, and people who live in the rural part of America, especially in these stories, rural Wyoming, which is definitely a place that I've not been to. And so I do not have like I do not have a very good image of what kind of place that is, especially before I read this book. And it felt like going into a different place. It felt like I'm going to a totally different territory, and that was kind of fun. It felt a little bit adventurous. Overall, the experience was just amazing because for someone who lives in a different part of the world, like literally and the opposite side of the world from the setting in these stories, the way that the characters in these books, namely those people who live at ranches and farms and cowboys, the way that they are depicted usually in mainstream media tend to be somewhat romanticized, and that is the kind of depiction that we usually see. I think it's very different from what is written in this book. Basically, it is so far from the romanticized image of, say, for example, cowboys, where you would see, them just, I don't know, riding horses, look cool and stuff like that, gunslinging or whatever. And that is I don't know, for me, it's like a very kind of like an uninformed version of what people would think of when they hear the keyword cowboy. But I think this story gives like a totally different image, and at the same time it's like really realistic. And when you read it, it feels like it's really gritty, but it has so much heart poured into it. And that's what I really like about Annie Proulx's writing, is that most of the characters in these stories, they are males, and Annie Proulx has this ability to write them in such a way that they are masculine, in fact, to the extent of being like, you know, having traits of toxic masculinity. But at the same time, the way that she writes them is like full of sympathy, full of heart. Um, it doesn't feel extremely judgy. Like she's just, as a narrator, the narrator that happens, especially the third person narrator, it tends to be like really dispassionate, and I kind of like about that, because it doesn't try to cram that a particular idea of a person or a group of person to the reader. It doesn't make the reader. It doesn't try to lead the reader into thinking that these people like that, or this idea is the right idea. That's what I like about her writing and the narration style in this book. So, like I said earlier, the way that cowboys and ranches are being depicted in this book, it feels very real. And what I mean by that is just that it feels like what are the kind of challenges that these people face in their daily lives. It doesn't try to glorify or glamorize whatever they're doing. It's just trying to show what's simply happening in their daily lives. And it usually isn't pretty, although, most of the time for stories to have conflicts, things aren't pretty. But I really like how it really shows the ugly side, the challenging side of their lives. And one of the main themes in this book is how harsh life can be, especially for people who live at the rural areas, rural places, rural Wyoming. How difficult it can be, and how their lives can actually be affected by the environment, by nature, by society. And there are so many things, so many uncertain things that can affect their lives. So, in such a way that they have to just keep power through it. And this is like a very common motif in a lot of these stories. So, most of the stories really focus on the people's their way of trying to just secure a livelihood, make some money, trying to get a good living. More focus is put on that, and less focus is put on things like self-actualization, stuff like ambition, stuff like emotions, stuff like finding more for dreams, or anything that is apart from survival. And that's kind of interesting, because I don't really live at a place where I'm really trying very hard to secure a good life for myself just for the sake of surviving. So that is certainly not the kind of reality I'm living in right now. But that is definitely the kind of reality that a lot of the people in these stories are experiencing. So in a way, these stories feel kind of fresh to me, because like these kinds of stories, they're like kinds of stories that popped up in my reading life once in a while, where the characters are really just trying to survive, struggling to survive, and and the story really shows what they are trying to do and how they are trying to achieve that. And sometimes their attempts can end up kind of tragic. And other times, their attempts can also end up being successful or coming to fruition. But basically, the main theme is just how people are surviving. So, in short, this book is really wonderful. Usually, I don't read like a lot of short story collections because I don't know, I tend to find short story collections to be kind of chaotic. Sometimes they're good ones, sometimes they're bad ones. They're like a mixture of good and bad. It's weird. But I think after reading this short story collection, I feel like I am trying to open myself more towards the possibility of reading other short story collections and see what happens after that. I mean, not that I've not read any short story collections before, but I didn't, I did not really focus on short story collections before this. So I think another thing that, another kind of experience that I'm having with this book is just a different experience with a different format. And I think this is kind of like one of the short story collections that I can really say I really love. Even though not all stories work for me, but overall I would say that, this whole book is like 5-star. Everybody has to read it. Seriously. So that's it for now. My thoughts on Close Range by Annie Proulx. And I'll see you again in a different video. So until then, take care, bye, and thanks for watching.